Hey Eagle fans, this is EaglefanKarl. This is going to be my reaction video to that win that was a lot closer than we thought it was going to be as the Eagles squeak by Washington and win their first game of the year to go to 1-0 as they win 32-27 in their opening game. And I guess we have to give some credit to Washington. The Eagles did sort of what I thought they were going to do. They focused on shutting down the run game, which they basically did shut down Washington's run game the whole time. They never really got much going on the ground. And Washington took advantage of that by hitting, Case Keenum made one big play and we gave them another play. And I'll get to that in a moment. But essentially that's what it came down to for them. They score one late touchdown again to make it look closer than it really was. But all in all, after a rocky start, the Eagles take over sort of the end of the second quarter and through the first and the whole third quarter and basically put this game away. So, a win is a win, and that's the way I'm essentially looking at this thing. I think that's the way we've got to look at it, and we've got to move on now to the next game of the season. But of course, we've got to go through some studs and duds first. With all wins, I always start with the duds first. And my number 3 dud, I'm going to go with 3 duds today. My number 3 dud is going to be Doug Peterson. And he would be higher on this list if it weren't for the fact that they did end up playing really well in the second half. But he made some calls that are just head scratchers, and I just don't get what he's doing sometimes. I mean, I understand what his general philosophy is, but sometimes I think that philosophy, he becomes a little too rigid with it, and he needs to take a step back and look at the larger picture. Specifically, the one I'm really thinking about is going for it on 4th and 2 when you're down by 10 points. At that point, I think you need to come away with points, get it back to a one-score game. I don't understand that. If he goes for it there and they make it, everyone's calling him a genius. But I just don't think it was worth that risk. Later on, when he goes for it on 4th and really less than 1 on his own side of the field, that's a little different because you've got a big quarterback that can get that short yardage situation. You can't do something like that on 4th and 2, so that's a lot harder to get. And so as a result, anything can go wrong when you do something like that. That's exactly what did happen. I think you wanted to come away with points there, and so for that reason, I don't think that was a good choice. Some of the other decisions he made sort of made me scratch my head. I still don't understand why they go for 2 when you go up 7 points. I would think you'd want to go ahead and be up 8 rather than potentially only be up 7. Yeah, okay, you have faith in your offense that they're going to convert, and that makes it a 2-score game. But the other side of that is their offense hasn't been able to move the ball at all. And if you kick the extra point, then you're not only saying, all right, they're going to have to score a touchdown, but they're also then going to have to get a 2-point conversion on top of that. So it's almost like a 2-score game anyway. So I just don't understand that. When it's, although it's not an automatic with the extra points, it's pretty close, and so for that reason, I don't see why you would do that. And then the other play that I really had a problem with is on 3rd and 1, you call this huge sweep play, which allows the defenders too easily of a chance to try and stop it. On the 3rd and 1, they're going to be looking for a running play. Those kind of plays work well when you sort of catch the defense off guard. If you're going to do something like that and maybe you run some misdirection off of it, then maybe it works. But all in all, that just does not really look like a play that it's going to be successful there. They rarely work in those instances. If you're going forward on a 3rd and 1, I'd much rather and you're going to run the ball, just go straight forward and try and get that yard that way. So for that reason, I hated that call. And you called a timeout to boot in front of it. So you called a timeout, you wasted a timeout, and then that's the play call you came up with. So I hated that as well. My number 2 dud is going to be Jim Schwartz. Of course, you guys know I'm not a huge fan of his defensive calls and his defensive philosophy. He'd be probably number 1 on this list if it weren't for the fact that the defense did play so well in the second half. But just I hate his philosophy of playing off the defenders. It only works if you're getting pressure with your 4-down linemen, which you weren't getting in the first half. I would have loved to have seen him mix in a blitz here or there in the first half just to throw Case Keenum off his game. Because you saw, once Keenum got rattled, he was not the same guy anymore. And we rattled him early in that 3rd quarter, and he just was not the same quarterback after that. So I would have preferred that you maybe try and do something like that early when you're not getting the pressure, just to try and throw him off his game. The big long touchdown pass that we had, I put that on Schwartz. You've got Maddox is out at that moment. You've got to have Rasul Douglas on the outside. You can't have Rasul Douglas going up against a speedy wide receiver and not have safety help over the top. That's just coaching malpractice, if you ask me. So for that reason, for me, that is on Schwartz for not recognizing in that situation when you've got the backup in there who's known to not have that kind of speed. You just can't have that situation. In that instance, you can't have that play called. But my number one dud is going to be Andrew Sendejo. He's the one that gave up the other big play, which it really shouldn't have been a big play. He makes two mistakes on that play. First of all, he comes off the wide receiver at the beginning of it to allow the catch to happen. And then after the catch is made, he does a terrible job tackling. In that instance, all you need to do is get him out of bounds at that point. They're not expecting that that's going to be a big play. And I put that mainly on Sendejo. He's the one that really has the shot there to bring him down or push him out and comes up short. So for that reason, he's going to be my number one dud because they basically handed them 7 points at the start of the game that you were crawling from out of then the rest of that first half. Obviously, though, with the win, there was a lot of good to talk about, and I've got 5 guys that I want to recognize with studs of the game for. My number 5 stud is going to be Darren Sproles. He continues to just excel. Given his age, when he's able to make those big plays that he was able to make, I think it's impressive that he's still able to do that. And he's been a huge contributor to this team. We struggled a little bit on the ground in this game, and he was the one guy that was consistently being able to get yards on the ground. My number 4 stud is going to be the other running back whose numbers weren't as impressive, but there's a caveat with all that. Miles Sanders, I think, had a good game. He should have had one long play that gets called back on the holding penalty that I thought was a questionable call. Understood why it got called, but ultimately I think that he makes a nice run there that he doesn't get credit for. But the thing that was really impressive to me is how he played in pass protection. For a rookie, I think he clearly showed that he's not going to be a liability that you're going to have to take off the field on third downs when you've got to worry about pass protection. He's going to be someone you're going to be able to keep in there for that. And for that reason, that was a huge thing I thought that he showed in this game. And for that reason alone, even without the play that gets called back, I'm going to put him on the studs list. My number 3 stud of the game is going to be Brandon Brooks. The Eagles' offensive line as a whole was impressive, but what he did especially in this game is especially impressive. When you think about where he was just a few months ago after the season ends last year, he's got to go under the knife for the Achilles injury. The fact that he's back, not that he's back at the beginning of the season, but he's back and playing at a very high level, I think is really impressive. So for that reason, Brandon Brooks gets all the respect in the world for me. I can't imagine what it took for him to get back for this game and play at the level that he played at in this game. And for that reason, Brandon Brooks is my number 3 stud of the game. Is there really any question who my number 1 and number 2 studs of the game are going to be in this? They've taught us some new math because 11 plus 10 equals 6 in my book. And that's going to be Carson Wentz, my number 1 stud of the week, and Deshaun Jackson, my number 2 stud of the week. Deshaun probably would have gone to number 1 if it weren't for that stupid penalty he had that killed our very first drive of the game. But both of these guys, I think, performed at a high level. Deshaun Jackson showed exactly what we wanted. We wanted that deep threat. The whole league knows now that that's going to work. And they're going to have to respect that. That's going to open up so much going forward. Teams are going to have to game plan against that. And it's really going to, I think, open up the underneath routes. It's going to open up the running game. There's a lot of things that this game hopefully is going to do for us down the road. Even if we don't hit those home runs every week, I think it's going to make a huge difference in our passing game in other ways. Because, guys, they're going to have to keep those safeties back because Jackson's going to burn you if you don't. And as far as Carson Wentz, is there any question why he's the number 1 stud of the week? I mean, he's got a perfect quarterback rating on third down in this game and really just, I think, showed exactly the MVP level that he was playing at in the 2017 season. He showed that I'm still convinced last year he had decent numbers, but he just didn't look quite the same. I don't think he was ever completely healthy. I think he came back too soon. I think that led to his other injury. And ultimately, I think he showed that with an off season now where he was completely healthy, able to work on his game and not have to worry about a rehab, that he is going to be back and be back at that MVP level that we saw in 2017. And hopefully he'll be able to continue that through the rest of the season. One other thing I should mention, in Doug Peterson's day after press conference today, he did mention that Malik Jackson suffered a significant injury. They're not saying exactly what that is, but that's obviously a huge loss. I do like some of the depth that we've got on the defensive line, but that's a huge loss to lose Malik Jackson, potentially for an extended period of time, but maybe even for the season. That would be terrible. We were all excited to see what he was going to do next to Fletcher Cox. And it looks like we're going to have to wait for that, if not till later in this year, maybe even till next year, to see what potentially that could look like. I think Jernigan's a solid guy that can come in there. He came up with a sack in this game, so I think he's a solid guy. But I think we have to acknowledge that that's a huge loss to lose Malik Jackson this early in the season. So there you have it. Those are my thoughts on the game. Let me know what you think. Are there any duds that I missed? Are there any guys you would have given studs to that I didn't recognize? Do you think I'm being too hard on Doug and Jim when we win and I still put the two coaches on the duds list? Am I being too hard on them? Leave your comments below. Obviously, it's on to Atlanta for the game next Sunday night. And then I'll check in, of course, this weekend with my prediction video. Until then, fly, Eagles, fly.